It's the Craggy Rugby Podcast. It's the midweek edition prior to the Munster home match. On the line tonight, I've got Dave Finn.
Good evening, everyone.
And William Davies.
Good evening, Alan. Good evening, Dave.
Okay, we'll go straight to the press conference as usual. William, who did we have today?
We had Tom Daly and Andy Friend.
That was a great performance and win on Saturday evening. Couple of close calls. I mean, the Racing game, then you had Ulster and Galway. What clicked specifically, do you think, on Saturday that allowed you to get that 80-minute performance in?
You said it right there, yeah. I think it was a massive win for us, yeah, and a much-needed win as well after those 3 defeats previously. But what clicked for us, I think everything clicked for us, really. I think we had a really, really good team performance. I think from 1 to 23, everyone had a really good game. I think maybe one thing we did a little bit better this week was stick to the game plan that we had planned throughout the week, which was play in the right areas. We'll save fuel for our pack, and then when we get into their half, we'll start playing on top of them, and we'll go to work then. And I think Jack and Blady did that really well for us. Our kick chase was really good, and I think we just smothered Leinster really, and did kind of try to play out of their own half a few times maybe, and we forced little errors which were big wins for us. And I think, yeah, we just really stuck to the game plan, and it really standed to us, and it was, yeah, as you said, a really good win.
I know, coming from a Leinster background yourself, is there a situation where you want to sort of maybe prove a point a little bit to them when you're playing for another team? And is it sometimes tricky? Can you overplay on that occasion? And on this occasion with you, did you actually turn that into a real positive for your performance?
Listen, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to have a good game against my old club, but throughout the week, I just treated it as any other game. Like, Connacht really needed this win. We had lost 3 big games, like the 2 Champions Cups games where we ran Racing close. We were disappointed with how we went against Bristol, and then like really, really disappointed with that Ulster game. So it was just like a focus throughout the week that like probably a lot of people didn't give us a chance there to go to Leinster and get a win. So but I think Jack said it in the media after the game that we had a few we had a bit of a disjointed week. We had a few injuries, a few lads pulling out with whatever reasons, and he just kind of said before we had a meeting in the hotel before the game, and Jack just said that like he felt something special coming that night, and yeah, I think we just all put in a massive performance, and as I said before, yeah, great win.
No, you need another one on Saturday evening. Munster coming. It doesn't get any easier. They're going to be smarting after a defeat in Belfast. They might be a bit stronger in terms of personnel. So how do you keep the same level of performance now? Connacht have been here before sometimes. They get a big win and then it falls off a little bit, and you can't afford any fall off against Munster.
Yeah, that was said at the start of this week as well. We kind of said, like, listen, it was a great win against Leinster, but it actually means nothing if we can't back it up again this week in the Sportsground against Munster. We were embarrassed here a few weeks ago by Ulster, and I think that win against Leinster had brought a really good buzz into the place, and like training is real good today. So yeah, it doesn't get a lot easier. Munster are looking pretty good this year, and they'll obviously be all guns blazing after losing this week or last week up in Ulster. So it's a massive challenge, and I played Munster a few times since I've been here, and I don't think I've won one yet. So it's obviously a massive challenge, but if we can get the win this week, it obviously puts us in a real good place, because Munster still have to play Leinster and a few other big teams, so it could put us in a real chance of getting into that final.
Tom, your try was, as William said, it was a great try and great for you personally, but it was an interception try, and Jack's was an interception try. Alex has got a couple of interception tries this year. I think that's that's as many in one season as possibly has been there in the previous 5 or 6. Is that down to you guys in the moment seeing an opportunity, or is it something that you've worked on with Pete in terms of the line speed, and it's a beautiful lucky benefit for the individual and for the team?
I think it's a bit of both. Like, our defensive system is an aggressive defense system with a lot of line speed, and that's what we try to implement in games. But it's probably a little bit different off first phase to get in it. Like, Jack's one, yeah, Jack's is a really good read. He said like he probably saw Ross Maloney at 9 and saw one player outside him. He probably knew where the pass was going to go, so he read that pretty well. But yeah, our defence system will be an aggressive defence system at line speed, and then obviously you're not going to get intercepts every time, so it is a bit of a individual read as well. With my one, I just saw Leinster had 2 forwards out in the midfield, and I knew I probably guessed they were going to use them to crash it up, so I kind of tried to get up early enough so that I could defend the man and defend the ball. And I just saw the pass go and it went right in front of my face. So I just took my hand out and grabbed it and ran for the line. And luckily I made it over.
Was that the best performance, 80-minute performance that Connacht have given in your time there, irrespective of the win?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to quantify that sometimes, but it's certainly a very impressive one. I just thought from the opening whistle and all the way to the death that they didn't stop. So it was very impressive. Was it the best? Yeah, I'd probably have to say it's certainly right up there, mate.
Yeah, Tom's just alluded to the fact that maybe they stuck with the game plan right through, and it was pretty obvious after the Ulster game that you weren't happy that they had stuck to the game plan right through. So was that the main message before Leinster? This is the plan and we have to play it.
We had a couple of key messages before the game. The first one was, whatever you do, be very decisive in what it is you're doing. Don't second guess yourself. Second one was, trust our systems. And the third one was, trust the game plan. And I also, Quinn Rue was our captain on the night, and I thought just the way he spoke to the players after our game prep, our captain's run on the Friday, how he talked to the players in the hotel at Herbert Park before we went across to the RDS, and then what he spoke to them about it before the game and at half time was really powerful. And it certainly, listening to the players post-game, they got a lot of belief out of that, and they got a lot of energy out of the way Quinn spoke. So there was a combination of things there, William. But to answer your first question again, it was an impressive performance.
Is that a role that it's maybe taken him a little bit of time to get into, but he now does seem to be a talisman player and obviously has a lot of respect within the organisation? He
does. Yeah, and it's one of the things we've been trying to build is our leadership group. You will have seen, Jared's been our captain, but we've also had Caelan Blade as a captain. We've had Dave Heffernan as a captain. We've had Quinn Rue as a captain. We've had Paul Boyle as a captain, and they all bring something slightly different. Owen Marston stepped in there on occasions too, and all of those blokes are in our leadership group. And they all have a slightly different way of doing it. And it's just trying to get a blend of the best bits of their respective leadership qualities and using them at a time. So Quinn, certainly the way he speaks, I demand this from you and I want you to deliver for me. Whereas some of our other leaders are follow me, watch what I do and see if you can emulate that. But on that night, certainly the way Quinn spoke to the group, it struck a chord and we got a response.
At the end of the game, he talked to the players about the Munster game, as in, this will mean nothing if we don't follow this up. Connacht have been here before. They've put in the big performance. How do you galvanise that? How do you keep that momentum going? And who's more responsible for that? Is that the players or the coaches?
I think it's a combination of both. We've also got Jack Birtwistle with us. He's joined the staff this year. We call him our performance skills coach, but he works on that mental part of the game. And my message to the players post the game was, we own all of our actions. We own the way we front up. We own the energy that we bring. And on Saturday night, we brought a lot of it. The previous Sunday night, we could be blamed for not bringing the energy that Ulster brought. So, and this is the great mystery of pro sport or anything that you're doing. How do you continue to bring that energy and that level of accuracy and excitement and well, yeah, energy really. How do you bring that on a daily, weekly basis that it's always there? So it's something we're working on, William, but there's a collective responsibility for that. I think we need to provide the right platform for it, but at the same time, and the right education. I talk about body, craft, and mind. We work on the body, we work on the craft. As of this year, we've been working on the mind in terms of how we build that resilience and that awareness and that strength. And then it's up to the players to bring it. So it is a collective, but it's something that's certainly in the forefront of our minds and something we're working very hard on.
Munster will bring a different challenge, probably smarting after their defeat in Belfast. What are you expecting from them? And another thing you said after the Leinster game, we're going to continue playing the same way, irrespective of the conditions. How dangerous a tactic is that if we get a full-on Sportsground evening on Saturday?
Yeah, it'd be foolish to keep trying to play like that. I'll probably preface that by saying if our ambition to play like that is never going to change. And where we've got ourselves caught and got ourselves, we've been undone before at our doing is we've continued to try and play like that when the conditions haven't allowed it. So I'll take that back, if you like, William, and say we'll hold that ambition to do it, but we'll also use our rugby smarts and say we're not going to try and play against the opposition and the conditions because we'll lose that game.
Andy, quick question regarding Alex Wooten. Is there any issues regarding him playing against Munster as he's on loan from them?
No, none at all, Dave. He's available to play and he's keen to play.
That's excellent. And just actually, I'll give Murray the credit here. I hadn't noticed it until I read his article today. You seem to target specific areas of Leinster over the course of the week from the Ulster game, and obviously the lessons that you learned from what went wrong against Ulster. I'm just wondering, looking ahead to Munster, how important is the analytics team to all of this? The guys who actually break down, highlight the faults within Connacht's play and areas that you can exploit with in other teams, because we talked a lot about the coaches, but the analytics team has to do the hard work of breaking down exactly what each individual player's role.
Yeah, listen, everyone plays their part without a doubt. Our analytics team probably spend about 90% of their time on us and what's actually working for us. So we have a few metrics that we put out there for the players, and the players, most of them anyway, not everyone gets off on that sort of stuff, but most of them get off on the fact that they want to see how they're going, career best efforts we call them, and what's working for them, and if it's not working, what they can be doing differently. So they certainly have input into the opposition, and they give us some really key metrics on that. But yeah, it's a collective there, Dave. The game plan itself, we will observe the metrics, but most of it comes from pretty thorough analysis on what they're doing and opposition are doing in both an attack and defence and set piece, and how we think we can exploit that. So it's a combination of the analytical team as well as the coaching staff.
Okay, guys, I was pretty excited after the commentary on that match at the weekend, the Leinster game, and there's still a lot of buzz going around. There was a huge amount of people on that press conference today. We don't normally have that. So, William, what are your thoughts now? You've had a few days to think about it.
It was a very good win. It was a very important win. It was badly needed. I didn't think it was going to happen. I accepted that Leinster weren't at probably the strength they would want to be for an interprovincial game. But Connacht played them off the park most of the time, dealt with everything they threw at them. Leinster had, looking at the stats, quite a lot of possession and position by the time the game finished. But they weren't clinical, and Connacht were. They took their chances. 2 intercept tries. There's always... there's a little bit of luck in those, but there's also a little bit of planning. It's good observational skills as to see who's in front of you. And I think the key thing from what Tom Daly said and Andy Friend, they stuck to their game plan rigidly. They didn't half do it or 3/4 do it. I think that was the story from the Ulster game, was that they didn't stick to it when they had to. They didn't so much lose faith in it. I think it just drifted away from them. In this game, they stuck at it. They're kicking. They kicked for over 500 metres. They wanted to play the game in Leinster's half of the field. It was a dry night. It was a windless night. It made kicking easy, and Jack Carty ran the game. And the key, and they've accepted the key now, is we've got to move this on. We've got to repeat this.
Absolutely. Dave, your thoughts on what was, as William just said, a much needed victory, because it makes up now for the home loss to Ulster.
Yeah, I finally got to watch the whole game. Thanks to you, actually. Looking back on it now, I think that we played really well, and I'm kind of fed up with the excuses that have been made for Leinster, because we didn't make those excuses last year when we were 40-0 down at halftime, and there's been excuse after excuse made for Leinster. They had injuries. They had some new players in. No, they weren't allowed to play, and that's what Connacht have to do. They allowed Ulster to play in the second half and allowed them to play very, very well. They allowed Bristol at times to play very, very well. They decided, I don't know, was it a collective, was it conscious or subconscious, that they weren't going to allow Leinster to play irrespective, and that was a decision made before they knew who was going to be in the Leinster jerseys. I think I think William is right. There's no point not allowing Leinster to play well if then this weekend we allow Munster to play well. And I think if you allow Munster to play well, and we've seen how they're developed under Steve Larkham, they're not just traditional 10-man rugby, give to the 10 and kick. They've got much more to themselves than that. They will be smarting after last week, because as we showed, as Ulster, who themselves weren't brilliant, but they definitely didn't allow Munster to play. And I think that's what Connacht have to do. They have to set that, and I think Andy did say it at some point, that's the template. That's the minimum level that Connacht have to do. If they don't allow teams to play well, then Connacht then these upsets no longer become upsets. They become what Connacht do. But if they allow teams to play well, it can get really, really messy. And I think it's intensity, it's the level of tackling. There were tackles made that were just insane. That's the level of intensity that has to be brought. And if that drops against Munster, and we've seen it drop against Munster, it doesn't have to drop by an awful lot. They can run over the top of us, because they were in good form up until last week, and they will be very sore about what happened in Belfast.
So coming from today's press conference, any more injuries?
There's a few more injury concerns. I think Bundy Aki has a knee injury and hasn't trained, and Gavin Thornbury has a shoulder injury. Now that's being assessed. I think the training issue is very simple. If you don't train, you don't start. That doesn't mean you can't go on the bench. So there's a couple there. I think it's likely you're going to see the likes of Dave Heffernan and Finlay Beelum. They were on Ireland minutes rest, so they're coming back. There will be people from the COVID situation last week who will continue to be unavailable, and because that we don't fully know who that is, we won't really know who's going to be around this team until the team is announced on Friday. But I suspect they wouldn't have been making many changes anyway. Why would you change? Why would you, when you've put in a performance like that? And to be blunt, Bristol the following week after that is probably a dead rubber game. The key game now is this one.
Yeah.
And Tom Daly spoke about Sammy Arnold, and Tom Daly admitted, and I thought fair play to him, he could have said it didn't matter. It did matter to him. He wanted to show Leinster. And I suspect Sam Arnold will want to show Munster. And that's just the game. And that's why these interprovincials are slightly different. These guys know each other. They've played with each other at underage level. And yeah, there's bragging rights around without being over the top about it. Connacht didn't go mad after that game. They sang a song in the dressing room and they were happy and delighted. But yeah, it's the subtlety of that. So it'll be fascinating to see who they do pick. I suspect training this week will be pretty harsh, pretty hard. There'll be guys wanting to get into that team saying, come on, I want my go now. So that's a good position to be in.
It certainly is. Okay, let's take a quick break. We would like to thank all our patrons for their support in helping keeping the podcast going. If you would like to help ensure that we can keep providing the most comprehensive coverage of Connacht rugby, you can do so by logging on to patreon.com/CraggyRugby, and for less than the price of a cup or a pint a month, hit the join button. You can also spread the word about our podcast to anyone with even the faintest interest in Connacht rugby and asking them to have a listen. You can let us know what you think of our coverage by contacting us on our Twitter handle @CraggyRugbyPod, or by sending an email to craggyrugby@gmail.com. You can go to craggyrugby.com to listen to our back catalogue of over 300 episodes that cover the last 5+ seasons of the highs and lows of not only the Connacht men's professional team and the Eagles, but also the exploits of the Connacht women's team in the Interpros. Remember, you can listen to us on your favourite podcast player by asking Alexa or Siri to play a Craggy Rugby podcast, or you can now even get us on YouTube. Just search for Craggy Rugby. Okay, before we preview Munster, there's something we didn't talk about last week. We were hoping to get Morgan on this week, but with the changes that are happening now again, with the Lions tour looking as though it's up in the air, could it have a big impact in this proposed Rainbow Cup? William, before we bring Dave in, your thoughts?
I'm staggered by this thought process. I was shocked to start with that it was announced on December the 23rd. Which really did look as if it was being rushed out before Christmas. It got very little media attention because, funnily enough, on Christmas Eve, sport isn't a high value product. We would be interested and our listeners would be interested, but the general public probably still haven't caught on to this. There's so many issues with this. We've got the COVID situation. It's getting worse. There's a lot of agility is going to be required to keep professional sport going. This competition is supposedly starting in April. It means that the Pro 14 as it stands is going to be wrapped up by the end of March. The two top teams, the top sides in Conference A will play the top side in Conference B in the final. There's no semi-finals. I think they've disrespected their own competition by doing this. I think they've disrespected the teams, and I think they've disrespected the fans. At the very minimum, there should have been two semi-finals so that 4 teams have a chance to win this thing rather than 2. And it's really hard to see how in April, suddenly teams are going to be able to travel from South Africa, come up here to play, or we're going to be able to go down there and play. You can't just hire a 777 plane and put 45 people on it. You can, but you'd need a very, very, very deep pockets.
Yep.
It just doesn't add up. I'm frankly mind-boggled. The Lions tour is another huge problem. The whole point of the Rainbow Cup for the South African teams was to give them rugby to get ready for the Lions tour.
Yep.
The chances of the Lions tour taking place in South Africa in July, in my estimation, are nil. It doesn't work if the Lions fans don't travel. It's made a total mess of the end of this Pro 14. When you look at the tables, where you're at now, if you look at Conference A, Ulster 10 wins out of 10, flying 46 points. They're now 10 points ahead of Leinster. That's a huge game on Friday night. That's a massive game, because if Leinster lose that, essentially you think, well, Ulster are in the final.
Yep.
Everybody else in that conference is gone. The Ospreys, Dragons, Glasgow, and Zebra. So they've now going to play minimum of 5, maximum of 7 matches to get to 16 with nothing to play for. Conference B slightly different. Munster 33 points on top. Connacht on 25. That's why our game on Saturday evening, huge. You win that, you're back in the game. Scarlets have 24 points. Cardiff Blues, who along with Ulster are the only team to have played all their games, are on 18. So you're going to have a lot of games that have very little meaning. I know it's difficult for organisations like Pro 14. I think they've done really well, but I'm disappointed the way this has been announced and put together, and I think it's opened up a can of worms for them, which is, it's going to take some effort to get that competition off the ground in April.
Yeah. And Dave, you've been to Wales recently, and you've got your, you were mentioning there, it's off air about the Cardiff situation. Like it's this, as you say, there's some big issues with the Pro 14, really, isn't there?
I think there's two slightly separate issues going on. The Rainbow Cup, I'm not going to disagree with anything William said, but I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle as to why I thought why it's a bad idea anyway. In terms of what's happening in Wales, there's a soul searching going on because the two games on Stevens' Day weren't too bad in terms of both were very close games. The two games on New Year's Day were dreadful, and there was a lot of ridiculously aimless kicking. I mean, we saw in Wales they're having this mad debate about why is there so much kicking. Well, kicking can work. Not all of Jack's kicks on against Leinster were textbook, but they were with a purpose. And the kicking on in Wales seemed to be just a case of let's kick the ball away. So there's that issue going on. In terms of the Rainbow Cup, I think William summed up perfectly in terms of why practically it's a bad idea. But I think even in a non-COVID situation, I'm not sure this is a good idea, this Rainbow Cup. I think Jerry Thornley has a really interesting article today on the Times website. And he's basically, I think he's got it down to, of the remaining games, he thinks only 16 will have anything will have anything resting on them, because very quickly it'll become clear that the two teams at the top will be gone. It could still be between ourselves. If the two games go to Munster and Ulster this weekend, that's it. Forget about it. That's your final sorted.
Yeah.
Then it comes a case of, well, who's going to take the 6 places for Europe? Well, 2 are gone. Leinster will almost certainly take 1. And then effectively you're looking at ourselves and Clonettley will take the 2 in our section, and then it's who takes the 3rd one in the other section. You've got a competition, as William says, it's fatally been undermined. But as I say, even without that, I don't understand why the South Africans couldn't organise an internal competition. They've made such a big deal about the Currie Cup. For them, the Currie Cup is huge. Why didn't they move the Currie Cup forward into this period in April, play it then, to give their teams the games they've been worried about without the prospect of coming up north and all that involves? You basically torpedo 2 competitions, the Currie Cup and this year's Pro 14, to fit in a competition which is primarily being used so that South Africans could possibly get game times to beat, against us. It doesn't do anything for any of the 4. It certainly does. There's absolutely 0 for the Italians, because their players aren't even going to be on any Lions tour should it happen. I'm very surprised and disappointed that it was signed off on, because the other thing is that if there are no fans going to be at these games, nobody's going to watch them.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, then, as Morgan would say, are the 4 best teams coming up anyway? Because I think the Cheetahs have been doing relatively well in the Currie Cup, so that's another matter altogether. So I think we can leave that one for another couple of weeks. As I say, hopefully we'll get Morgan on the line at some stage in the next couple of weeks when things might be a bit clearer. We don't know. Of course, COVID's having such a big impact. But yeah, what are your thoughts about this weekend? For me, if Connacht don't win last week, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I wouldn't say last week is a waste of time. I think every game has its merits. You play who's in front of you on a given night. I think Munster will be a different challenge. I think it's a huge challenge for Connacht. We beat Leinster on occasions and we beat Ulster reasonably regularly. If you look at not maybe always away games, but home games. Munster are a different setup for us. We seem to struggle against them. But if they can bring the intensity and the accuracy that they had on Saturday, then they are well capable of winning this game. But I still think it'll be a massive challenge. I think Munster really have a lot to play for. A win for them, as Dave says, nearly guarantees them a place in this final. Munster and Connacht have both played 8 games, and you have to get to 16. So they're both going to have 7 games to play after this one. But if Munster were 13 points clear, say, that would take some catching. We will also have to go to Munster. We're going to play all the teams in our conference, but we won't be going to Ulster, and Leinster won't be coming here, as I understand it, when these other fixtures are announced. The 2 Irish interprovincials next weekend are huge, because Leinster are now 10 points behind Ulster, but they have 2 games in hand. As Dave says, there is some games of interest,
But there's going to be an awful lot of games that will mean absolutely nothing. And that's really disappointing.
Yeah. So Dave, what are you like? I'm looking at it. Connacht have only won 25% of their games against Munster since the Pro 14 started. We won't even go back further than that, but they've only won twice in this sort of Christmas period at home against Munster, and haven't beaten them since 2017. Do you? I know you're Mr. Optimistic, and we should win every game, but are you seriously thinking we can win this game at the weekend?
Are you actually asking me that question?
I am asking you that question because I want you to back it up with the reasons why.
Put, I mean, I think our worst record up until the last couple of years was Ulster away. That's been dealt with. Our worst record away from home after that was Leinster. It's been dealt with. Mm-hmm. Our worst record at home is 2017. That's not exactly huge. This is a new team. This is a new dynamic. Yes, as I say, it will come down to whether or not we allow them to play. I don't think this team is going to allow them to play the way they want to play. I think it's going to be fascinating to see which teams they picked. I do think Munster will be stronger than they will send a stronger team. They made 14 changes. They may make 14 back. It's hard to know. They're pretty much at full strength. They've no injuries out of last weekend, which in some ways kind of exposes how their lack of intensity last week. I do think the Wooten and Arnold are going to be huge. I think they're going to want to have a point to prove. And I don't know what happened, but there was something that was said in passing today about what happened to Sam Arnold in Munster. When he himself fronted up to the press conference, you got the impression that he has a point to prove, and that's the way I'll leave it. I think there's much more to that story that we don't know about, and we may never become privileged to. But I think that Sam Arnold will be fired up this weekend. There's also other guys who want to have a point to prove. I mean, the 15 guys that started last week, if they're all fit, and there's a caveat over obviously Gavin Thornbury, but those guys will want to prove that actually they are the best 15, because the competition now for every place. I mean, if you consider that Dom Robinson-McCoy is effectively third choice tight head, but there's no logical reason to drop him after what he did last weekend. Now, I know Finlay was on Ireland minutes, I know Davies on Ireland minutes, but Shane Delahunt and Dominic have done nothing to deserve to be dropped, and that's what you want. So those guys will want to be professional pride about being the number one for Connacht in your position. The only person you can absolutely say at the moment who's guaranteed, two players who are guaranteed to start if they're number one last weekend, absolutely set in stone. Well, 3, John Porch at 15, Jack at 10, and Dennis at 1. Everybody else is in a fight to hold on to their Connacht jersey. So that should fire them up. You've got the Munster factor as well. You've got the local derby factor as well. And you've also got the fact that if you win this game, you're 3 points behind them. You're 4 points behind them. Let's say 4 points. 3 points would be optimistic. But then again, I actually had Leinster down for a 10-point win last weekend. So that's which for me is ultimate pessimism.
Certainly is. I had a bet on Connacht last weekend because they were 12-1. They're only at the moment Connacht at 3-1.
That was most ridiculous. I mean, I love when bookies get it that wrong. There was no reason on paper why the bookies were wrong before the game, and likewise they're going to have Munster as favourites going into it as well. It's going to come down to attitude. If the attitude is wrong, if the attitude is 90%, it may not be enough to beat Munster. But I think we can win this game. There's an awful lot riding on it. Munster will be fired up, but I think this game is winnable, but it's not easily winnable.
Interesting. Well, certainly do. As I said, the bookies have Munster as firm favourites on this at the moment. That's without the teams being picked. But just looking at the weather forecast, and it's looking like it might be a cool night with very little wind and no chance of rain. So could be the perfect night for Connacht, William.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Friend has talked about this a fair bit, but he did roll back very slightly today. And fair, why not? He said it when he was buzzing after the win against Leinster, but I think reality is when it's hard at the Sportsground, you have to play the conditions. Mm-hmm. I hope on Saturday night that there's no wind, there's no rain, it's a dry ball, and let's get it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're looking at these two teams, and they are joint third with the most tries, averaging 4 tries a match. So we could have quite a shootout, which is not something we normally see with Munster, but it would be lovely to see it in the Sportsground rather than some of the 3-0 scores we've seen in the past. So it would be nice to see something like that.
Loose, cut it loose. Break out or nothing changes. Sad and confused. Don't wait until